Jacob's life is one of the roughest journeys in the Bible, full of faith, deception, and ultimate redemption. It's a big threat to our world where survival often beats out integrity. His story forces us to face some ugly truths about ourselves. Can God actually use broken, flawed people to build His perfect plan? This story might just challenge everything you think you know about divine grace and mercy.
Jacob's life is a raw journey of faith, deception, and ultimate redemption. It speaks directly to our world. Survival often beats out integrity. His story forces us to face ugly truths. Can God actually use broken people to build His perfect plan? This story might just challenge everything you know about divine grace and mercy. We are tracing the messy, complicated roots of a promised nation. Genesis 25 verse 21 introduces a desperate couple. Isaac begged the Lord. He pleaded for his barren wife Rebekah. Finally, God answered those deep prayers. She was pregnant. In their world, childlessness was a heavy, silent curse. Rebekah carried that painful burden for 20 years. Imagine the crushing despair. They were heirs to a massive promise, yet they could not conceive. But God's answer to Isaac's prayer came with a massive twist. Genesis 25 reveals that the two babies fought right inside her. She cried out, "Why is this happening to me?" So she went to ask God, and the Lord answered, "Two nations are in your womb. Two rival peoples will divide. One tribe will overpower the other. The older will serve the younger." This violent pregnancy foreshadowed a lifetime of bitter conflict, a struggle that would define not just two brothers, but entire warring nations. The prophecy flipped the natural order. The firstborn would serve. From the womb, God was rewriting human rules and setting a brand new pattern. Genesis 25 verses 24 to 26 records the wild birth. When her time finally came to give birth, twin boys filled her womb. The firstborn arrived flushed and red, his entire body covered in thick, hair-like skin. They named him Esau. Right behind him came his brother, grasping his heel, so they named him Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when they arrived. The difference between them was unmistakable from day one. Esau was first. He was rough and impulsive, shaped by his physical traits. Jacob was born holding that heel, a clear sign of a schemer, a quiet, determined soul, ready to fight for his own place. As they grew, their paths diverged sharply. Genesis 25 explains, Esau became a rugged hunter, a wild master of the open country. Jacob was content to stay close to home, working quietly around the family tents. Isaac loved Esau for the wild game he brought, but Rebekah favored Jacob. Esau was the ultimate rugged man of the wild, strong and bold. Jacob was quiet, preferring the safety and peace of the home. This deep division split the parents. Isaac chose Esau, while Rebekah chose Jacob. This favoritism planted the seeds of ruin, seeds that would grow into a bitter harvest for the family. Then came a tipping point, a trivial moment with permanent consequences. Genesis 25 tells the story of one fateful, exhausting day. Jacob was simmering some red stew. Esau stumbled in from the wild. He was starving and begged Jacob, "Let me eat some of that red stew." He was desperate. So Jacob looked at him. "Sell me your birthright first." Esau groaned. "Look, I am about to die. What good is it to me?" But Jacob demanded, "Swear to me now." So Esau swore his birthright away. The birthright went to Jacob. In return, Jacob gave Esau some bread and lentil stew. He ate, drank, got up and left. Just like that, Esau despised his birthright. This moment reveals so much about who these brothers really were. Esau, impulsive and driven by his immediate desires, making him ready to swap his birthright, a position of supreme honor and duty in their society, all for a meal. His dramatic claim, that he was starving to death shows his dramatic flair and instant gratification. Jacob, however, was calculating and incredibly sharp. The moment he saw an opportunity, he seized it, using his brother's physical weakness for his own advantage. While his clever scheming looks highly questionable by modern standards, prove he deeply understood the true value of that birthright, along with a relentless drive to do whatever it took to get it. This trade of the birthright for a cheap meal became a vivid symbol of Esau's recklessness and Jacob's opportunistic mind. Interestingly, Scripture does not openly pass moral judgment on Jacob's opportunistic scheme just yet, but the rest of the story clearly shows how this fateful choice shaped the future of both brothers and their descendants. Fallout from this trade was massive. The birthright was never just about physical wealth. It carried deep spiritual blessings and duty to lead. By despising his birthright, Esau showed he had absolutely no foresight or respect for God's promises given to his ancestors. For Jacob, securing this birthright was only the very first step on his path to inheriting all of God's promises. His methods were bad, but his determination to claim these blessings would be a recurring theme in his life. This episode sets the stage for everything that follows. Jacob's sheer cleverness and determination would lift him to incredible heights, but it would also plunge him into deep conflict and danger. His journey proves that God can easily use our flaws and deepest imperfections to fulfill his ultimate purpose. Genesis 27, verses 1 to 14, takes us to a critical moment in Isaac's life. When Isaac was old and nearly blind, he summoned his oldest son, Esau, saying, "My son." "Yes, father," he answered. Isaac continued, "I am old and do not know when I will die. So take your weapons, your bow and quiver, and go out into the open country to hunt wild game. Cook me that savory food I love so much and bring it here. Let me eat so I can give you my blessing before I die." Isaac's old age and near blindness created an urgent, fragile state of vulnerability. Feeling his mortality, he wanted to fulfill his fatherly duty to bless his firstborn before leaving this world. After all, the blessing was never a mere formality. It was a prophetic, life-altering act that would shape the destiny of his entire bloodline. Isaac's plan to give Esau this blessing shows his continued deep preference for his oldest son, despite that earlier birthright sale. Maybe the old patriarch was completely oblivious to their secret deal, or considered it totally invalid. Regardless, his plan to bless Esau triggered a massive chain of events that would forever alter the course of family. Genesis 27, verses 5 to 10, introduces Rebekah's plot to favor Jacob. She was secretly listening as Isaac spoke to Esau. So, when Esau went out to hunt for wild game, Rebekah immediately pulled her favorite son Jacob aside. "I just heard your father telling Esau to bring home some wild game and cook. Bring me some of that delicious food so I can bless you in the presence of the Lord before I die. Now, my son, listen closely to my instructions. Go out to the flock and bring me 2 choice young goats. I will prepare the exact kind of delicious food your father loves. Then take it to him so he can eat and bless you before he dies." Rebekah's plan was bold and incredibly risky. She did not just defy her husband. She put her favorite son in direct danger. Her actions were driven by a complex web of motives: the desperate desire to see God's prophecy fulfilled, that the older sibling would serve the younger, her obvious favoritism for Jacob, and perhaps a belief that he was better suited to lead the family. Cooking the meal was only the first step. Genesis 27. 11 to 17 details Jacob's elaborate disguise. But Jacob hesitated, telling his mother, "My brother Esau is a hairy man, and my skin is smooth. What if my father touches me? I would look like a deceiver and bring down a curse instead of a blessing." His mother replied, "Let any curse fall on me, my son. Just do what I say. Go and get them for me." So he went, got them, and brought them to his mother. She prepared the delicious food, the exact kind his father loved. Then Rebekah took the finest clothes of her older son Esau, which were in the house, and put them on Jacob. She also covered his hands and the smooth parts of his neck with the goatskins. Then she handed her son Jacob the blood, delicious food, and bread. This dramatic passage reveals Jacob's initial hesitation, not from moral principles, but purely from fear of being caught. Rebekah's response, taking on any potential curse, shows her fierce determination to see this plan succeed. The elaborate disguise, using Esau's clothes and goatskins, shows just how far they were willing to go to deceive Isaac. Jacob's encounter with Isaac, told in Genesis 27, verses 18 to 29, carries incredible tension. Jacob went to his father and said, "My father." "Who are you?" my son Isaac asked. Jacob lied to his father. "I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you told me. Please sit up and eat some of my game so you can bless me." Isaac asked his son, "How did you find it so quickly, my son?" "The Lord your God gave me success," he replied. Then Isaac said to Jacob, "Come near so I can touch you, my son, to know whether you really are my son Esau or not." The scene is thick with suspense. Jacob repeatedly lies, even invoking God's name to lend credibility to his story. Suspicious Isaac insists on touching his son. Genesis 27, verses 22 to 23 continues. Jacob went close to Isaac, who touched him and said, "The voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau." He did not recognize him because his hands were hairy like those of his brother Esau. So he blessed him. This test of touch reveals Isaac's deep internal conflict. His senses are at war. Touch says it is Esau, but the voice is Jacob's. Yet, trusting his sense of touch over his hearing, Isaac proceeds with the blessing. The actual blessing given to Jacob, recorded in Genesis 27 to 29, is powerful. He smelled the scent of his clothes and blessed him, saying, "The smell of my son is like the smell of a field blessed by the Lord. May God give you heaven's dew, and earth's richness, and abundance of grain and new wine. May nations serve you, and peoples bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may the sons of your family bow down to you. Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be everyone who blesses you." This favor, rich in vivid imagery and promises, covers massive wealth, political rule, and a unique spiritual status. Ironically, this blessing includes dominion over his brothers, echoing the prophecy from before the twins were born. Esau's return and the shattering discovery are told with fierce intensity in Genesis 27. Isaac had just finished blessing Jacob, who had barely left his father's presence when his brother Esau walked in from the hunt. He, too, had cooked a savory meal and brought it to his father, saying to him, "Father, sit up and eat my wild game so you can bless me." His father, Isaac, asked him, "Who are you?" "I am Esau, your firstborn," he answered. Isaac trembled violently and gasped. "Who was it then that hunted game and brought it to me? I ate it right before you came and blessed him, and indeed he will be blessed." When Esau heard this, he burst out with a loud and bitter cry, begging his father, bless me too, my father." But Isaac said, "Your brother came deceitfully and took your blessing." Isaac's violent trembling reveals the utter horror of the discovery. His chilling declaration that Jacob will indeed remain blessed shows he knew the spoken word could never be recalled. This was a divine prophecy, not a simple fatherly wish. Esau's despair is devastating. Genesis 27 captures his agony. "Is he not rightly named Jacob?" Esau cried, "for this is the second time he has cheated me. He took my birthright and now my blessing." Then he wept. "Have you not saved any blessing for me?" Isaac answered, "I have made him your master. I made all his relatives his servants and provided him with grain and wine. What is left for me, to do for you, my son?" Esau wept to his father. "Do you have only one blessing? Father, bless me too." Then Esau wept aloud. His pain is deep, but it also exposes how completely he had undervalued his sacred birthright. Only now does he realize what is gone. His desperate plea for a blessing, any blessing, is deeply moving. Isaac offers a secondary blessing in Genesis 27. Isaac answered him, "Your home will be far from thee, richness of the earth, away from the dew of heaven. You will live by the sword and serve your brother. But when you grow restless, you will tear his yoke from your neck." This harsh decree, unlike Jacob's blessing, promises a brutal life of struggle for Esau's descendants. Yet it also holds a promise of ultimate freedom from Jacob's rule. But Esau's desire for revenge is immediate. Genesis 27 reports that Esau held a deep grudge against Jacob because of the blessing his father gave him. He muttered to himself, "The days of mourning for my father are close. Then I will murder my brother Jacob." This dark plan reveals the raw depth of his anger, putting Jacob in mortal danger. The crisis demands swift action. Genesis 27 outlines Rebekah's desperate plan for Jacob's escape. When Rebekah learned of Esau's murderous threats, she sent for her younger son Jacob and warned him, "Your brother plans to kill you. Now, then, my son, listen to me. Flee immediately to my brother Laban in Haran. Stay with him for a while until your brother's fury cools. When his anger is gone and he forgets what you did, I will send word to bring you back from there. Why should I lose both of my sons in one single day?" Rebekah's plan shows her cunning. She shields Jacob from Esau's immediate wrath, but also preserves the promised lineage. Her final warning suggests she fears not just for Jacob's life, but also for the dark consequences Esau would face if he murdered his brother. Jacob's flight to Haran, as recorded in Genesis 28 verses 1 to 5, marks a new chapter. Isaac called for Jacob, blessed him, and gave him a solemn command: "Do not marry a Canaanite woman. Go at once to Padan Aram, to the household of Bethuel, your mother's father. Take a wife from the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother. May God Almighty bless you and make you fruitful, multiplying your descendants until you become a vast community of nations. May He grant you and your offspring the blessing given to Abraham, so that you can possess this land where you currently reside as a foreigner, the land God promised to Abraham." Then Isaac sent Jacob on his way, and he set out for Padan Aram, traveling to Laban, son of Bethuel, the Aramean, the brother of Rebekah, mother of Jacob and Esau. This passage shows that Isaac, despite the deception, accepts God's sovereign will and blesses Jacob again, this time knowingly. He also issues specific marriage instructions, emphasizing the vital importance of keeping the family line pure. So, Jacob departs, leaving behind a fractured family and an enraged brother. His journey to Haran is no mere escape. It is the beginning of a deep spiritual transformation. The trials ahead will test his character and prepare him to become Israel, the father of the 12 tribes. This story of deception and desperate flight is a powerful reminder of how human choices, even when driven by selfish ambition or fear, are used by God for His purposes. It also illustrates the lasting consequences of our choices and the complex reality of family relationships. Genesis 28:10 and 11 marks the start of Jacob's trek toward Haran. He left Beersheba and journeyed onward. Reaching a certain place, he stopped for the night because the sun had already set. Taking a stone, he placed it under his head and lay down to sleep. Imagine him, alone, for the first time in his life, fleeing his home, sleeping out in the open with only a stone for a pillow. Yet in this vulnerable moment, God chose to reveal himself to Jacob in an extraordinary way. Genesis 28:12-15 describes his famous dream. He saw a massive stairway resting on the earth, its top reaching to heaven, with angels ascending and descending on it. Right there above it stood the Lord, and he said, "I am the Lord, the God of Abraham and Isaac. I will give you this land where you lie, and your descendants will be like the dust of the earth. You will spread out to the west and east, to the north and south. All families on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. I am with you and will watch over you wherever you wander, and I will bring you back to this land. I will fulfill every single promise." This breathtaking vision of a stairway to heaven is far more than a powerful revelation linking heaven and earth, showing that God's constant presence is real. This divine promise reaffirms the blessings given to Abraham and Isaac, now handed down to Jacob. His response, written in Genesis 28, verses 16-22, reveals a deep awakening from his sleep. Jacob realized, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not even know it." Terrified, he said, "How awesome is this place? This is surely the house of God, the gate of heaven." Early the next morning, Jacob took the stone from under his head, setting it up as a sacred pillar, pouring oil over it. He named the place Bethel, though the city was formerly called Luz. Then Jacob made a vow, "If God goes with me and watches over me on this journey I am taking, giving me food to eat and clothes to wear, so that I return safely to my father's house, then the Lord will be my God, and this stone that I set up as a pillar will be God's house. I will surely give you 1/10 of everything you give me." This vow marks the start of a personal walk between Jacob and God. For the first time, we see him claim God not just as his father's deity, but as his own Lord. His arrival in Haran, written in Genesis 29, leads to his meeting with Rachel at the well. Resuming his journey, Jacob reached the land of the eastern peoples, where he noticed a well with 3 flocks of sheep resting nearby. Since the animals drank from that well, a heavy stone always covered its opening. When all the flocks were gathered there, shepherds would roll the stone from the mouth and water the sheep. Then they would return the stone to its place over the well. Jacob called out to them, "My brothers, where are you from?" "We are from Haran," they answered. He asked, "Do you know Lan Nahor's grandson?" "Yes, we know him," they replied. Jacob asked, "Is he well?" "Yes," they answered. "And look, Here comes his daughter Rachel with the sheep. Jacob said, "The sun is still high. It is not time to pen the flocks. Water them, sheep, and let them graze." "We cannot," they replied, "until all the flocks assemble, and the stone is rolled away from the well. Only then water the sheep." While he was still talking with them, Rachel arrived with her father's sheep, because she was a shepherdess. When Jacob saw Rachel, daughter of Lan, his mother's brother, and Lan's sheep, he stepped up and rolled the stone away from the well, watering his uncle Lan's sheep. Then Jacob kissed Rachel and began weeping aloud. He explained that he was a relative of her father, the son of Rebekah. Instantly she ran to tell her father. This encounter at the well echoes similar meetings in his family history. Like Abraham's servant finding Rebekah, Jacob's action of single-handedly moving that heavy stone from the well shows his incredible strength and his deep desire to impress Rachel. His reunion with Lan's family is warm, described in Genesis 29, verses 13 to 14. When Leah heard the news of his sister's son, he ran to meet him, embracing him, warmly kissing him, and bringing him to his home. There, Jacob shared his whole story. Then Leah declared, "You are my own flesh and blood." However, Lan's initial hospitality quickly turns into a demanding work. The deal unfolds in Genesis 29. Laban told Jacob, "Since you are family, must you work for me for absolutely nothing? Tell me what your wages should be." Now Laban had 2 daughters. The older was named Leah, and the younger was Rachel. Leah had weak, dull eyes, but Rachel was stunning with a lovely figure. Jacob fell hard for Rachel. He offered, "I will serve you 7 years for your younger daughter." Laban agreed, "It is better that I give her to you than to some stranger. Stay here with me." So Jacob set to work. He served 7 long years for Rachel, yet they felt like just a few days, because he loved her so deeply. But this deal shows both men's true hearts. Jacob was blinded by devotion. Laban was quietly calculating. Those 7 years of toil were a quiet twist of fate. The man who tricked his own family now slaves away honestly. Then comes the trap in Genesis. Jacob finally demanded of Laban, "Give me my wife now. My time is completed, and I want her." So Laban gathered everyone there, all the local people together, and threw a massive wedding feast. But when night fell, he took Leah instead and brought her to Jacob's bed, and Jacob lay with her. Laban even gave his servant Zilpah to Leah. Morning came, and there was Leah. Jacob confronted Laban. "What have you done to me? I worked for Rachel. Why did you trick me like this?" The poetic justice here is staggering. The man who fooled his blind father is now left completely blind in the dark of his wedding night. His cry of betrayal clearly echoes the pain Esau felt years ago. Laban's cold reply and their second deal are laid out in Genesis 29. Laban replied, "It is not our custom to marry off the younger daughter before the older. Finish this bridal week, and we will hand over the younger one. But it will cost you another 7 years of hard labor." So Jacob agreed and finished the week. Then Laban gave him Rachel too. He also gave her his servant Bilhah as her maid. Jacob loved Rachel far more than he ever loved Leah, and he spent another 7 years slaving away for Laban. Now Jacob is trapped married to 2 sisters. This was a recipe for bitter rivalry. His clear favoritism toward Rachel mirrors the mistakes of his own parents, keeping a toxic cycle of family drama alive. His children are born right in the middle of this fierce battle. Leah gives birth to Reuben and Simeon, then Levi and Judah. Rachel, desperate, sends her servant Bilhah to Jacob. Bilhah bears Dan and Naphtali. Next, Leah stops conceiving, so she hands over Zilpah, who gives him Gad and Asher. Then Leah conceives, again bearing Issachar and Zebulun. Finally, Rachel conceives and gives birth to Joseph. This baby boom is fueled by pure sisterly rivalry, with each wife fighting for Jacob's love through children. The names they choose reveal deep pain and desperate hope. These brutal years in Haran completely reshaped Jacob. He went in alone, but emerges with a massive, fractured family. Through hard labor, constant betrayal, he finally reaps what he sowed long ago. Even amidst all these messy choices, we can see God slowly fulfilling his promise to build Jacob into a great nation. Genesis chapter 30, verses 25 to 28, marks his desire to return home after Rachel gave birth to Joseph. Jacob told Laban to let him go so he could return to his own homeland. "Give me my wives and children I worked for, and let me finally leave." "You know how hard I have worked for you," but Laban answered him, "If I have found favor in your eyes, please stay. I have learned through divination that the Lord blessed me because of you. Name your price, and I will pay it." This moment reveals the deep tension between Jacob wanting to leave and Laban wanting to keep him around, recognizing the immense blessings Jacob has brought. Jacob's massive success as a shepherd unfolds in Genesis chapter 30, verses 29 to 43. He proposes a terrible deal, asking only for the spotted and speckled animals from the flock. Yet, through a clever mix of selective breeding and clear divine intervention, Jacob grows incredibly wealthy. Genesis 31, verses 1 to 3, describes the growing anger of Laban's sons and God telling Jacob to return. Jacob heard that Laban's sons were whispering that Jacob had taken everything belonging to their father, building his entire fortune at their father's expense. And Jacob saw that Laban was turning against him. Then the Lord said to him, "Return to the land of your fathers, and your own relatives and I will be with you." The secret escape plan unfolds next in Genesis, verses 4 to 13, as Jacob explains everything to Rachel and Leah, revealing a dream where God told him to leave. His wives fully support his decision, calling out their father's unfairness. Genesis 31, verses 17 to 21, details their quiet escape during sheep-shearing season. Jacob quickly put his children and wives on camels and pushed all his livestock out ahead of him, along with every single possession he had accumulated in Padan Aram, heading back to his father Isaac in Canaan. But while Laban was away shearing his sheep, Rachel stole her father's household gods. Jacob also outright deceived Laban the Aramean by not telling him he was running. He fled with everything crossed the Euphrates River and headed straight for the hill country of Gilead. Rachel's theft of those idols complicates things, maybe showing she wasn't quite ready to fully cut ties with her family. Laban's hunt for them is recorded in Genesis 31. On the third day, Laban heard that Jacob had run off. Taking his relatives, Laban chased Jacob for 7 days, finally cornering him in the hill country of Gilead. But God warned Laban the Aramean in a dream, telling him to be very careful what he said to Jacob, whether good or bad. Jacob had already pitched his tent in the hills of Gilead when Laban caught up camping right there with his relatives. This dream warning beautifully shows God's fierce protection over Jacob, even when his own choices were highly questionable. The dramatic confrontation on Mount Gilead unfolds in Genesis 31, verses 26 to 42. Laban accuses Jacob of escaping like a thief and stealing his idols. Blind to Rachel's theft, Jacob lets Laban search the entire camp. Rachel, sitting directly on the gods, tricks her father, claiming she cannot stand up because of her monthly period, preventing him from searching where she sat. Then Jacob unleashes his anger at Laban for years of mistreatment. For 20 years I served you. Your sheep and goats never miscarried, and I never ate rams from your flocks. 4. Never brought you animals torn by wild beasts. I absorbed those losses myself, while you demanded I pay for everything stolen by day or night. By day, the heat scorched me. By night, the frost bit, and sleep completely fled my eyes. It went on like this for 20 years in your house. I worked 14 years for your 2 daughters and 6 more for your flocks, and you changed my wages 10 times over. If the God of my father, the God of Abraham and the fear of Isaac had not stood with me, you would have sent me away empty-handed. But God saw my misery and the hard labor of my hands, and last night he rebuked you. This fiery speech reveals Jacob's deep pain of injustice and his trust in God's protection on his behalf. The covenant between Jacob and Laban is sealed in Genesis 31:43-55. They pile up stones as a physical witness to their promise not to harm one another. Laban names the mound Jegar Sahadutha in Aramaic, while Jacob calls it Gilead in Hebrew, meaning a heap of witness. Genesis 31:55 marks their final parting. Early the next morning, Laban kissed his grandchildren and his daughters blessed them, and then set off for his own home. With this emotional farewell, a major chapter of Jacob's life finally closes. Walks away from Haran, no longer a lone runaway, but the head of a massive, wealthy family. His brief meeting with angels at Mahanaim is recorded in Genesis 32, verses 1 and 2. As Jacob traveled on, the angels of God met him. Seeing them, he declared that this is God's camp, so he called the place Mahanaim. This holy meeting serves as a powerful reminder of God's shield, gearing Jacob up for the terrifying trials ahead. His tense preparation to face Esau is recorded in Genesis 32, verses 3-21. Jacob sends messengers ahead to announce his return. When the messengers return, they bring terrifying news. Esau is coming with 400 men. Jacob is utterly paralyzed. In his panic, he divides his people into 2 separate camps, hoping that if Esau attacks one, the other group might escape. Desperate, he cries out to God, "Oh, God of my grandfather Abraham, God of my father Isaac, Lord who told me to go back to my homeland and my family, promising to make me prosper. I am entirely unworthy of the constant love and loyalty you have shown your servant. I crossed this Jordan River with nothing but a walking staff, yet now I fill 2 camps. Rescue me, please, from the hand of my brother Esau. I am terrified he will strike us down, killing mothers and children alike. Yet you promised me that you would surely bless me, making my descendants as countless as the sand of the seashore." This desperate prayer exposes Jacob's agonizing struggle between terror and trust, clinging to God's word, while confessing his own failures. Jacob then readies a massive peace offering for Esau, sending it ahead in waves to soften his brother's heart. And so ends his frantic preparation for the face-off he feared for 20 long years. The desperate runner who fled in shame now returns as a wealthy. The patriarch struggled. He still faced the consequences of his past and his faith in God. Genesis 32, verses 22 to 32, tells a deeply mysterious story. This is Jacob's brutal midnight wrestling match at Peniel. That night, Jacob woke up. He gathered his 2 wives, 2 servants, and his 11 sons, guiding them all safely across the shallow Jabbok River. Once they were safely across, Jacob was left entirely alone in the darkness. Suddenly, a man grappled with him until dawn. This midnight fight represents Jacob's agonizing war with his past and his future. The story continues. When the stranger saw he could not win, he struck Jacob's hip, wrenching his joint out of place as they fought. Still, Jacob held on. The stranger cried, "Let me go, for dawn is breaking." But Jacob gasped, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." The man asked his name. "Jacob," he replied. The stranger declared, "Your name is no longer Jacob. Now it is Israel, because you fought with both God and men, and you have survived." This radical change means he is no longer the deceiver, the quiet schemer. Instead, he is a man who wrestles with God. Jacob walks away from the people, fight blessed, but permanently wounded, limping from the strike to his hip. This physical scar would always remind him of that holy, defining encounter. Soon, the terrifying reunion with his brother Esau arrives. In Genesis 33, verse 1, Jacob looked up and saw Esau marching toward him with 400 men. He quickly divided his children among Leah, Rachel, and his 2 servants. He placed the servants and their kids in front of Leah's family next, and Rachel and Joseph at the very back. Jacob stepped out front, bowing low 7 times. He approached his brother cautiously. This deliberate act of bowing 7 times proves his humility and desperate search for reconciliation. Yet Esau throws off all expectations. He runs forward to meet Jacob, wrapping his arms around his neck, kissing him, and they both weep bitterly. This sudden emotional peace is incredibly unexpected. Esau's fierce embrace shows that years have finally healed the old wounds. The conversation that follows reveals a deep grace between them. Jacob insists that Esau take his peace offering, pleading, "Please accept this gift because God has been incredibly gracious to me and I have absolutely everything I need." After this reunion, they part in peace. Genesis 33, verses 16 and 17, recounts that Esau turned back toward Seir, while Jacob journeyed to Succoth, where he built a home and put up shelters for his livestock. That is why the place is called Succoth. Jacob's decision to settle down and later buy land in Shechem starts a brand new chapter. Genesis 33 verses 18 to 20 explains that after traveling from Padan Aram, Jacob arrived safely at the city of Shechem in Canaan, setting up his camp near the gates. For 100 pieces of silver, he purchased the plot of land from the sons of Hamor, Shechem's father, where he pitched his tents. There, he built an altar, naming it El Elohe Israel. But this quiet season is brutally shattered by what happens to his daughter Dinah, a dark tragedy recorded in Genesis 34. Dinah, whom Leah bore to Jacob, went out to meet them, local women. When Shechem, the ruler of that land, saw her, he violated her. The violation of Dinah by Shechem triggers a horrific spiral of violence, even though Shechem claims to love Dinah and begs to marry her. But Jacob's sons, especially Simeon and Levi, plot cold-blooded revenge. They trick the Shechemites into agreeing to circumcision as a condition for the marriage. Then, while the local men are recovering from the circumcision, Simeon and Levi raid the city, slaughtering every man. Jacob is horrified and consumed by panic. Genesis chapter 34, verse 30, records his warning to Simeon and Levi, you have brought absolute ruin on me by making me a stench to the Canaanites and Perizzites who live in this land. We are so few. If they unite and attack my entire family, and I will be wiped out." In the wake of this horror, God commands Jacob to return to Bethel. Genesis 35, verses 2 and 3, shows him leading his family in a deep spiritual cleansing. He tells his household and everyone with him, "Get rid of the foreign gods you carry. Purify yourselves and wash your clothes. Then come, let us make our way up to Bethel, where I will build an altar to the God who answered me in my distress, and who has stayed by my side wherever I walked." At Bethel, God renews his sacred promise and confirms his name change to Israel. Genesis 35, verses 10 to 12 says, "Your name is Jacob, but you will no longer be called Jacob. Your name is now Israel." And so he named him Israel, and God promised, "I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and multiply. A great nation and a vast community of nations will descend from you. Kings will be born of your bloodline. The land I gave to Abraham and Isaac, I give to you, and I will give this land to your future descendants." But on the road from Bethel to Ephrath, Rachel goes into labor. Genesis 35, verses 16 to 20 says they left Bethel, and while they were still a short distance from Ephrath, Rachel began to give birth, suffering through a terribly difficult labor. In the midst of her pain, the midwife tried to comfort her. "Do not despair, you have another son." As she breathed her last, slipping away into death, she named her baby Ben-Oni, but his father called him Benjamin. So Rachel died, buried right there on the road to Ephrath, that is, Bethlehem. Her death while giving birth to Benjamin is a crushing blow, the Jacob marking the end of a defining chapter in his life. And that chapter concludes with one last family crisis involving his oldest son, Reuben, and Bilhah, briefly noted in Genesis 35, verse 22. While Israel lived in that region, Reuben went in and slept with Bilhah, his father's concubine. And Israel heard about it. This betrayal by his firstborn will carry devastating, lasting consequences, ruining his place in the family and his future inheritance. This season of Jacob's life is marked by reconciliation and painful tragedies that continue to shape his character and the future of his lineage. Genesis 35, verse 27 marks his return home. Jacob comes back to his father Isaac in Mamre, near Kiriath Arba, that is, Hebron, where Abraham and Isaac once stayed. This return completes the great cycle of Jacob's journey, bringing him back to his roots. The final days and burial of Isaac are, Genesis 35, 28 to 29 says, "Isaac lived 180 years. Then he breathed his last, dying at a ripe old age, gathered to his ancestors, he took his final breath and was gathered to his people, old and satisfied years. Then his sons Esau and Jacob buried him, a brief moment of shared grief that brought the brothers together again. But then the story shifts to Joseph. Genesis 37, verses 3 and 4 describes how Israel loved Joseph more than all his other sons, because he was the child of his old age. And he made him a beautiful, ornate robe. When the brothers saw their father loved him more than the rest, they hated him. They could not say a single kind word. This favoritism towards Joseph echoes Jacob's own past as his mother's favorite, bringing back the exact same family tensions. That special coat, often called the coat of many colors, becomes a constant painful symbol of this. Preference. Joseph's dreams in Genesis 37, verses 5 to 11, fuel their jealousy. He dreams his bundle of wheat stands upright while his brothers bow down to him. Then another dream, the sun, moon, and 11 stars bow down to him. These prophetic dreams, though hated by his brothers and questioned even by his father, clearly point to his future role as their savior. And then comes the turning point, the sale of Joseph by his brothers. Genesis 37, verses 18 to 20, tells of their plot to murder him. They spotted him from far away. Before he could reach them, they made their plan. Here comes that dreamer, they whispered to each other. Come on, let's kill him. We will throw him into one of these cisterns and say a wild animal ate him. Then we'll see about his dreams. Reuben, however, intervenes in Genesis 37, verse 22, to save him. When Reuben heard their plan, he tried to save him, pleading not to take his life. Don't shed his blood, he said. Just throw him in this cistern, out in the desert, but do not hurt him. Reuben wanted to save him and bring him back to their father safely. But Judah's dark plan wins out. Genesis 37, verses 26 to 28, records Judah asking, "What do we gain by killing our brother and hiding his blood? Let us sell him to the Ishmaelites instead of hurting him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood." They agreed. So when the Midianite merchants passed by, the brothers pulled Joseph out of the cistern. They sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took him to Egypt. Then began their elaborate lie, recorded in Genesis 37, verses 31 to 33. They took his robe, killed a young goat, and dipped the coat in its blood. They brought that ornate coat back to their father. "Look at this," they said. "Is this your son's coat?" He recognized it instantly. "It is my son's robe." He wept. "Some wild beast has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces." Jacob's deep grief is overwhelming. Genesis 37, verses 34 to 35 says, "Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned his son for many days. All his children tried to comfort him, but he refused to let them, saying, 'No, I will go down mourning to my grave, to join my son in the dead grave.' So his father wept for him. These years of deep sorrow and mourning were a dark, painful season. Unaware of his beloved son's actual fate, he carried a crushing weight that his remaining family simply could not lift. Story then shifts to a devastating famine across the land of Canaan. Genesis 42, verses 1 and 2, tells how Jacob learned of grain in Egypt. He asked his sons, "Why are you just staring at each other?" He told them, "I have heard there is food in Egypt. Go down there and buy some for us so we can live and not starve." Sending his boys to Egypt for grain sets off a chain of events that will eventually bring this broken family back together. But first, Simeon is locked up and Benjamin is demanded on next trip. This dilemma tortures Jacob. Genesis 42:36 captures his raw grief. Their father cried out to them, "You have robbed me of my children. Joseph is gone, Simeon is gone, and now you want to take Benjamin. Everything is crashing down on me." His terror of losing Benjamin, the last son of his beloved Rachel, is completely understandable after all his loss. Yet a second trip to Egypt with Benjamin is told in Genesis 43. Judah insists, offering a personal guarantee for his safety, finally convincing Jacob to let him go. Genesis 43:11-14 shows Jacob blessing the mission. Their father Israel tells them, "If it must be, then do this. Pack the finest products of our land in your bags and carry them down to the man as a gift. Some balm, some honey, some spices and myrrh, pistachio nuts and almonds. Take double the amount of silver with you, because you must return the money put back into the mouths of your sacks. Maybe it was a mistake. Take your brother and go back to the man right away. May God Almighty grant you mercy before the man, so he will release your other brother and Benjamin. As for me, if I am bereaved, I am bereaved. Joseph's dramatic revelation to his brothers in Genesis 45 is one of the most raw emotional moments in the entire Bible. When Joseph finally breaks down and reveals himself, he sends them back to Jacob with a message. In Genesis 45:9-11, he says, "Hurry back to my father. Tell him his son Joseph says, 'God has made me ruler of all Egypt. Come down to me immediately. You will live in the region of Goan, and be near me, you, your children, your grandchildren, your flocks and herds and everything you own. I will support you there, because 5 years of famine are still ahead. Otherwise, you and your household and everyone who belongs to you will starve.'" This sudden invitation for Jacob to move to Egypt is met with total disbelief. Genesis 45:26-28 describes it. "They told him Joseph is alive and ruler of all Egypt. Jacob was completely stunned. He refused to believe them, but when they shared everything Joseph had said, and when he saw the wagons Joseph sent to carry him back, the spirit of their father revived. Israel declared, "I am convinced. My son Joseph is still alive. I will go and see him before I die." Jacob's hesitation is natural given the shock of the news. Yet he receives a divine sign at BBA as told in Genesis 46:2-4. God spoke to Israel in a night vision, calling Jacob. "Jacob, here I am," he replied. Then God said, "I am God, the God of your father. Do not fear going down to Egypt, because I will make you a great nation there. 4 will go down to Egypt with you, and I will bring you back again, and Joseph's own hand will close your eyes." The long trek to Egypt and the tearful reunion with Joseph are laid out in Genesis 46:29-30. Joseph prepped his chariot and rushed to Goan to meet his father Israel. As soon as Joseph appeared before him, he threw his arms around his father and wept for a long time. Israel said to Joseph, "Now I am ready to die, since I have seen for myself that you are still alive." Settling in the land of Goan marks the beginning of the final phase of Jacob's life. Genesis 47, verses 7-10, narrates his encounter with Pharaoh. Then Joseph brought his father Jacob in and presented him to Pharaoh. After Jacob blessed Pharaoh, Pharaoh asked, "How old are you?" And Jacob said to Pharaoh, "The years of my pilgrimage are 130. My years have been few and difficult, not equaling the years of the fathers." Then Jacob blessed Pharaoh and left his presence. The last 17 years of Jacob's life in Egypt were a time of peace and prosperity described in Genesis 47. Summarizes the Israelites settled in Egypt, in the region of Goan, where they acquired property grew fruitful and increased greatly in number. Jacob lived in Egypt 17 years, making the total years of his life 147. His final blessings in Genesis 48 and 49 show him adopting Ephraim and Manasseh, Joseph's sons, as his own, elevating them to the status of tribes. Mirroring his own life story, Jacob crosses his hands as he blesses them, giving the younger Ephraim the greater blessing. The prophecies for each of Jacob's 12 sons told in Genesis 49 are rich in symbolism and meaning for Israel's future as a nation. Each son receives a blessing, or in some cases, a rebuke that will shape the destiny of his tribe. Jacob's instructions for his burial are clear and emphatic. Genesis 49 verses 29 to 32 records that Jacob gave them these instructions: I am about to be gathered to my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave in the field of Ephron the Hittite, the cave in the field of Melah near Mamre in Canaan, which Abraham bought along with the field as a burial place from Ephron the Hittite. There Abraham and his wife Sarah were buried. There Isaac and his wife Rebekah were buried, and there I buried Leah. Jacob's death and the national mourning in Egypt are described in Genesis 49 and 50. When Jacob finished giving instructions to his sons, he drew his feet up into the bed, breathed his last, and was gathered to his people. Joseph threw himself on his father and wept over him, kissing him. Then Joseph directed the physicians in his service to embalm his father Israel. So the physicians embalmed him, taking a full 40 days, for that was the time required, and the Egyptians mourned for him 70 days. The grand funeral and burial in the cave of Impala in Genesis 57 to 13 marks the end of Jacob's earthly life, but not his legacy. His journey, marked by struggle, deceit, loss, and reconciliation, shows God's deep faithfulness and the true complexity of the God-human experience. Jacob's path proves that God can use even our failures and struggles to fulfill his purposes. What lessons have you drawn from the life of this patriarch? How does Jacob's story speak to your own journey of faith? If this video touched your heart or made you reflect, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs this message today. Jacob's story reminds us that transformation is possible for all of us. Did you enjoy? If you found hope in this story, hit subscribe and turn on those notifications. You won't want to miss our upcoming stories about powerful biblical figures and the real-life lessons they teach us. Remember, just as God moved in Jacob's life, He wants to move in yours too. See you in the next video. God bless.